Hello and welcome everyone. So I am continuing with the lectures on renal pathology and I'll be taking the important topics of nephritic syndrome followed by nephrotic syndrome. So let's start with nephritic syndrome. So nephritic syndrome is a very important topic for the exams, and in nephritic syndrome there are a group of glomerular diseases which present with common clinical manifestations, and those manifestations because of the glomerular injury which is occurring because of inflammation. So inflammation is causing the glomerular injury, and then it is causing the common clinical manifestation of hematuria. Hematuria is passage of RBCs in the urine. Then there is proteinuria. So there is damage to the glomerular basement membrane, the glomerular structures, and that is causing the filtration of protein in the urine. So protein which is coming out in the urine, it is of non-nephrotic range. So I will teach you later that in nephrotic syndrome, the protein which is excreted is more than 3.5 gram per day, while in nephritic syndrome, the protein excretion is less than 1 gram per day. So it is called non-nephrotic range, while this is the nephrotic range proteinuria seen in the nephrotic syndrome. Then there will be azotemia, there will be rise in the blood urea nitrogen, serum creatinine, and hypertension. So all these clinical manifestations, they are common in the glomerular diseases which are presenting with nephritic syndrome. So what are those glomerular diseases and which are causing nephritic syndrome? So these are the causes of acute proliferative glomerulonephritis or the nephritic syndrome. First and most important is the post-infectious glomerulonephritis, and this in this the post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis is the most important cause, but there are also other infections which can cause the glomerulonephritis, like in staphylococcal endocarditis, then with meningococcemia, certain viral infections like hepatitis B, C, then HIV infection, and also parasites like malaria and toxoplasma. So they can also cause glomerulonephritis besides the most common group A beta hemolytic streptococcus. Then other important causes are rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. This I will take later in a separate lecture. Then membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis and proliferative lupus glomerulonephritis, which is again the manifestation of systemic lupus erythematosus in the kidney. So all these glomerular diseases which will cause the glomerular injury, and it will manifest as the nephritic syndrome. So I'll be taking the post-infectious glomerulonephritis in detail, and especially laying stress on the post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. So we should start with the pathogenesis. So infection-associated glomerulonephritis, it can be caused by a variety of pathogens like bacteria, viruses, then parasites. The most common, it is caused by the beta hemolytic streptococcus. So these bacteria or these infectious agents, they have certain antigens. So when they reach the body, the antibodies, they are formed against these antigens. For example, in streptococcus, there is this antigen which is SPEB. So its name is streptococcal pyogenic exotoxin. So this antigen, the antibody will be formed against these, and the group A beta hemolytic streptococcus, it is the nephrogenic strain of streptococcus, so which will cause the nephritis, and this antigen will incite this antibody formation. So antigen antibody reaction occurs in the circulation, and these antigen antibody complexes, they will reach the glomeruli, and when they reach the glomeruli, they will reach the mesangium, they will reach in the subendothelial areas, and when these complexes they get deposited, they will cause the activation of the complement system. I already told you, explained you in the last lecture how these immune complexes they cause the glomerular injury. So they will cause the activation of the complement system. When there is activation of the complement system, then there is formation of C3A, C5A. So these are the anaphylotoxins, and they will cause the chemotaxis of the inflammatory cells like neutrophils and monocytes. And these monocytes, neutrophils, they will get recruited in this region of glomeruli. So, and also there will be release of various cytokines, and all these will cause the damage to the glomerular basement membrane and also the podocytes. And after that, later on, these immune complexes, they will get deposited in the subepithelial location. So this is the glomerular filtration barrier. It consists of this fenestrated endothelium, and then there is the basement membrane, this orange one, and followed by the visceral epithelial layer of podocytes. So initially the complexes, they were present in the subendothelial location, but later on when there is glomerular damage because of all this inflammatory process, these complexes will get deposited in the subepithelial location. So you should remember that the deposit in the post-infectious glomerulonephritis, they are in the subepithelial location. So they are seen as humps in the electron microscopy. Also, there is one more theory that they can also be in situ immune complex formation, because these bacterial antigen, they do molecular mimicry with the glomerular antigens. So they can be formation of antibodies against those antigen. So they can be circulating immune complexes as well as in situ immune complexes against the planted antigens. So in this way, there is damage to the glomeruli, damage to the glomerular basement membrane, and because of that, these RBCs and proteins, they will get filtered in the urine and will be seen as hematuria and proteinuria. So there is a diagram I want to show you. So here again, which I already explained you, whenever there is immune complexes deposition in the glomeruli, mesangium or subendothelium, there will be complement activation, and because of that there will be formation of C5A, C3A, that will cause the recruitment of the neutrophils. Also, this membrane attack complex is formed, which will cause damage to the cells of the glomeruli, that is epithelial cells, endothelial cells, mesangial cells, and also release of cytokines, chemokines. So all this will cause the glomerular damage, and because of the glomerular damage, these antigen antibody complexes, they will also get deposited in the subepithelial location. See, this is the endothelial layer, then this is the basement membrane, and after that this is the visceral epithelial layer of cells, which has these food processes also known as podocytes. So here the immune complexes, they will get deposited in the subepithelial location. So this is the normal, and this is the nephritic syndrome. So, and when there is complement activation, there is recruitment of these inflammatory cells, monocytes, neutrophils, and all this will cause this damage to the glomeruli. So this is in the flowchart form. So there is activation of the complement system, then C3A, C5A formation, also formation of the membrane attack complex, that will cause damage to the cells of the glomeruli and recruitment of these inflammatory cells. Then there will be release of the cytokines, chemokines, and they will be ultimately the proliferation of the cells in the glomeruli, and there will be leukocytic infiltration. Because of this, the glomeruli will be enlarged and cellular. Then there is injury to the capillary and glomeruli, as I told you. Then there will be damage to the glomerular filtration barrier, leading to hematuria and proteinuria. So RBCs and proteins will be filtered out in the urine. So later on there will be decrease in the glomerular filtration rate, followed by oliguria. Oliguria will lead to retention of fluid, that will cause the edema, and especially in the periorbital region. Then later on, because of decreased GFR, there will be increased burn creatinine, manifesting as azotemia. Then there is renin angiotensin system activation, which will lead to sodium water retention and cause hypertension. So these are the series of events which are seen in all the nephritic syndromes. So when we talk about post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, it is caused by group A beta hemolytic streptococcus, and it is most commonly caused by the certain strains, which are these strains are types 12, 4, and 1. And when the patient presents with PSGN, the patient is most commonly a child. It can be seen in any age group, but most commonly it is seen in children of 6 to 10-year age group. And the patient will present with fever, and there is a prior history of sore throat or skin infection. That is, this will tell you that there is infection by the group A beta hemolytic streptococcus. So there is skin infection. There can be skin infection, especially if the patient resides in a overcrowded area and in a poor socioeconomic status. So there is passage of smoky or cola colored urine. This is because of the hematuria. So when RBCs they are coming in urine, the urine color becomes smoky or cola colored. So these are the clues that you will get in a problem-based question on post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. So they will give you history of a child who is coming with fever and past history of sore throat or skin infection, and he's passing cola-colored urine. Then patient will be having also edema. So by this you can make a probable diagnosis of post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. In adults, the onset of PSGN is abrupt, and he generally present with hypertension, edema, and increased blood urea nitrogen. So streptococcus group A beta hemolytic streptococcus is the nephrogenic strain for causing the glomerulonephritis, and you have to remember these types 12, 4, and 1 for the MCQs. And the specific antigen which is inciting this immune complex formation is streptococcal pyogenic exotoxin B. Then it causes the type 3 hypersensitivity reaction. Again, you have to remember this for the MCQs. And because there is complement activation, so serum complement levels are low, and this is useful for making a diagnosis of PSGN. So for the diagnosis, we also do the renal biopsy, and renal biopsy is important for PSGN. And in PSGN, the glomeruli becomes enlarged and cellular. So I already told you that because of this complement activation, there is damage to the glomeruli. There is recruitment of the neutrophils and monocytes. So they will be infiltrate of the leukocytes, especially neutrophils and monocytes within the glomeruli. And also there is proliferation of the endothelial and mesangial cells, and because of which the glomeruli becomes enlarged and cellular. So you see here, this is the normal glomeruli. This is the basement membrane is highlighted with the PAS stain, and these are the tubules, normal tubules lined by the cuboidal epithelium, and this is the glomeruli, and inside this there is a capillary tuft. So here you can see the glomeruli is enlarged in size, and inside there these are the inflammatory cells and also proliferating mesangial and endothelial cells. And also the involvement of glomeruli in PSGN, it is global and diffuse. So global means that the whole of the glomeruli is involved. The whole of the glomeruli, it is involved by this pathology. And diffuse means that in the kidney, more than 50% glomeruli, they get involved by the disease process. So global and diffuse involvement of glomeruli is seen in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Then in electron microscopy, this is again very important because MCQs come, and there is, I already told you that there is deposition of the immune complexes in the subepithelial site. So in between the basement membrane and the podocytes, there is deposition of these subepithelial deposits of immune complexes, and this is also known as humps. So humps are seen in the subepithelium in the electron microscopy. So you have to remember this. And also in the early stages, the deposits can be subendothelial, but in the later stages, they are always subepithelial. Then in immunofluorescence, again, the deposits of complement 3, C3 and IgG, they will be seen, and there is starry sky or lumpy bumpy appearance on the immunofluorescence. So these are the fancy names which you have to remember for the MCQs. So this is the starry sky or lumpy bumpy appearance, while in the electron microscopy you see the hump of the immune complex which is located subepithelial in the subepithelial location. Now other lab investigation which can be done in the PSGN, they are anti-streptococcal antibody titer. So ASO titers, they can be used to diagnose PSGN, and more specific test is anti-DNase B antibody. So both these titers, they are also important for the diagnosis, and anti-DNase B, it is more specific for group A beta hemolytic streptococcus. Then complement 3 levels, again they can be done and they are decreased. And in the urine, the important findings are hematuria, presence of dysmorphic RBCs. So RBCs, they are of distorted shapes. Then RBC cast can be seen because the tubular proteins, the hyaline proteins of the tubules, they get embedded with these RBCs and result in the formation of RBC cast. Then there will be proteinuria. So normally the proteinuria in PSGN will be less than 1 gram per 24 hours. And lastly, the disease course. So it is a good prognosis in children. So more than 95% children, they recover, and only less than 1% they progress to rapidly proliferative glomerulonephritis. And in adults, the prognosis is poorer as compared to children. 60% will recover, while rest they can progress to either chronic glomerulonephritis or rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. So all the content is mainly from the Robbins, and the other references, they are mentioned below the pictures. So in the next lecture, I'll be taking the nephrotic syndrome. Thank you very much.